Bien, buenas tardes a todas y todos. Les damos las gracias de estar aquí en la presentación de este libro, de esta conferencia del doctor Ayaz Achakzai, del libro My Life and Times, an autobiography by Abdul Samad Khan Achakzai, que es un personaje que participó activamente en los movimientos de liberación de Asia Central, que uno de esos resultados fue la creación del Estado de Pakistán, de donde el personaje precisamente tuvo gran participación. Entonces, en este caso, la Cátedra Ibn Khaldum de Estudios del Medio Oriente y África del Norte ha decidido, digamos, para este año hacer la mayoría de sus actividades de forma presencial, pero también de transmisión en vivo, en este caso en forma híbrida. Y de ahí que para nosotros fue importante tener esta oportunidad de una conferencia de este tipo, que va a ser en inglés y que vamos a tener una traducción consecutiva con estudiantes de cursos de traducción de la Escuela de Lenguas Modernas, a cuales agradecemos muchísimo que nos hayan colaborado. Entonces, a partir de ahora, la dinámica va a ser la presentación en inglés del doctor Ayaz y la traducción que van a hacer los estudiantes de los cursos de traducción sobre el desarrollo de lo que fue la publicación de este libro y lo que significa desde el punto de vista histórico tener una fuente de este tipo aquí en Costa Rica. Así que les agradezco mucho la llegada de ustedes aquí para esta conferencia y les cedo el espacio a el doctor Ayaz y a los traductores. Gracias.
First of all, thank you all for coming to this presentation of My Life and Times at the University of Costa Rica.
Primero que nada, muchas gracias a todos los que atendieron y vamos a presentar el libro My Life and Times el que vamos a hablar en esta conferencia.
To begin with, I would really like to thank Dr. Esteban. We had been in correspondence for a few months, and it is just really amazing that we have finally been able to make this happen.
Agradecerle al profesor Esteban porque se pudo realizar esta actividad. Estuvimos intercambiando mensajes y por fin se pudo dar esta actividad acá en la universidad.
So this is the first slide, and on the right is the cover of the book, and the book is right here. If anyone is interested, please get in touch and I can get them a copy.
Esta es la portada del libro. Quien esté interesado en observar el libro puede acercarse.
This is about me. I am the co-translator of the book, and right at the bottom is my Twitter and my Facebook. So if anyone would like to get in touch, please feel free.
Esta es la información mía. En la parte de abajo pueden observar mi Twitter y mi Facebook por si en algún momento quieren contactarse conmigo. Y siéntanse libre de hacerlo.
Okay, so I'm going to start by giving you all some sort of a context because Costa Rica is very far away from South Asia.
Okay, vamos a empezar primero poniéndonos en contexto porque Costa Rica está muy lejos de lo que es el sur de Asia.
So the subcontinent, what used to be like India, was a colony of the British for about 200 years, from 1750 till 1947.
Can you please repeat that? Sorry.
India is very far away from Costa Rica, so I'm going to give you some context about the topic.
Okay, esto fue lo mismo que dije hace un momento, que vamos a entrar en contexto por la lejanía que hay en el sur de Asia con Costa Rica.
So what you must understand is that all of India and even parts of Burma.
Lo primero que tienen que entender es
Burma. Sorry, what? Burma.
Lo primero que tienen que entender es la parte con Birmania, perdón.
They were a colony of the British for around 200 years, from 1750 till 1947.
Fueron colonias de la británica entre 1950 a 1945.
This was perhaps the most important colony of the British in the whole world.
Esta fue una de las más importantes colonias en esos momentos.
to give you some idea of the importance, I'm going to give you a few, some examples.
Para dar o entrar en contexto, voy a darles algunos ejemplos.
So I'm not sure if you've heard of the opium wars in China, where almost all the population of China was using the drug opium.
No sé si ustedes saben de la droga llamada opio. En este caso es una droga utilizada muchas veces en China.
So the British made a lot of profits by selling opium to the Chinese, and all of that opium was grown here.
En este caso, la droga llegó a estos lugares, la droga que ya mencionamos, el opio.
And during World War I and World War II, millions of soldiers from India fought for the British in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, all over the world.
En este caso, durante la Primera Guerra Mundial y la Segunda, muchas personas de estos lugares perecieron por la droga.
And some scholars also say that the Industrial Revolution in Britain was financed by taking raw materials like cotton from India and then selling the processed cloth back to it.
Okay, en este caso se menciona que me perdí.
Cotton.
Algodón.
Yeah.
En este caso se menciona que utilizaron durante la revolución industrial el algodón y, digamos, básicamente se lo trajeron a estos lugares.
So this is just to give you the idea of how important this whole region was for the British and why they wanted to maintain control.
En este caso, este mapa es lo que básicamente le daba importancia en esas épocas a Gran Bretaña, y este es básicamente el mapa de esos lugares.
Just like here in Latin America, obviously there were movements against this colonial power.
Al igual que en Latinoamérica, en estos lugares hubo una revolución para evadir que es, digamos, la colonización.
However, these movements were not in the form of violence or war, they were all political movements.
En este caso, solo los movimientos eran pacíficos y básicamente buscaban la paz.
Here is a picture that I found in our family home.
Esta es una foto de mi familia que encontré hace muchos años.
If you read the top, you can see that there are 5 future prime ministers in this picture.
Si ustedes leen la descripción, pueden encontrar que hay 3 personas que son muy importantes para India.
These were all people who were big leaders in the Indian independence movement.
2 de estos fueron grandes figuras en la independencia de India.
The person I am pointing to is Jawaharlal Nehru. The person I'm pointing to is Jawaharlal Nehru.
La persona que él está señalando es Jawaharlal Nehru.
Yep.
Nehru.
He was the first prime minister of India after the independence, and he was the prime minister for around 20 years.
Él fue el primer ministro de India básicamente por muchos años, y posterior fue el segundo ministro, si no me equivoco. Okay.
For 20 years. This is his daughter, Indira Gandhi.
La señora que él me señaló es Indira Gandhi.
She was also a prime minister of India.
Ella también era una importante ministra de India.
This child here is Rajiv Gandhi, who is the son of Indira and the grandson of Nehru.
El niño que él señaló es el hijo de Indira Gandhi y el nieto de Jawaharlal Nehru, llamado Rajiv Gandhi.
He was also the Prime Minister of India.
Él también fue un ministro de India.
And these two individuals at the back
Y estos dos señores que él señaló
were the Prime Ministers of Kashmir.
fueron los primeros ministros de Kashmir.
So you can see that all of these people played a great part in like India after the country gained independence.
Como mencionamos, estas personas fueron importantes figuras para la independencia de India.
These two people, Bacha Khan and Samad Khan, like Achakzai, their story is very different.
Los dos señores que mencionó Ayaz son básicamente muy importantes.
And this presentation is the story of my grandfather, Samad Khan Achakzai.
Y esta presentación es sobre el libro que publicó mi abuelo, Samad Khan Achakzai.
Achakzai. So these are some basic facts. If you would like to read them, they're in Spanish.
Si ustedes quieren leer estos datos que están en español, pueden hacerlo.
So he was born in 1907 and he was assassinated in 1973. You can read it. Okay. So he meets Gandhi. So point number 2 is that he meets Gandhi and Jinnah in 1931. He forms the first newspaper in Quetta, and this is kind of a big deal because newspapers were not allowed by the colonial authorities at that time.
Este tercer punto es muy importante porque los periódicos no estaban permitidos en esa época.
These days we have Google and the internet and email, but back then newspapers were the only way to create political awareness.
Ahora ustedes pueden encontrar Google, Gmail y muchos otros medios digitales, pero en esos momentos el periódico era lo más importante para comunicarse.
Point number 4 is that he was a great believer in non-violence.
Él fue un gran creyente de la no violencia como ideología política.
I think you all must have heard of Gandhi, who was the leader, non-violent leader in his country of India.
Muchos de ustedes saben de Gandhi, que era él básicamente el mayor creyente de la no violencia.
This non-violent movement then inspired Nelson Mandela in South Africa and Martin Luther King in the US.
Este movimiento de Gandhi básicamente promovió o ayudó a Nelson Mandela y a Martin Luther King.
Point number 5 is very important to note because he sided for a united India and did not want the partition.
En este caso, el punto 5 es muy importante porque se puso del lado del Partido del Congreso en contraposición a la Liga Musulmana.
Point number 6 is that after Pakistan was made, he spent nearly 20 years in prison.
Después de que creó el partido de oposición, él estuvo encarcelado por 20 de 26 años.
This is important because while his colleagues over the border in a free like India became prime ministers and took part in politics, people like him in Pakistan were put into prison. I'll start slow. This is important because
Esto es muy importante porque
his colleagues in the independence movement
sus compañeros en el movimiento de independencia
became prime ministers of India
se convirtieron en primeros ministros de India
and took part in the politics of India,
y tomaron parte en el partido, en la política de India,
but people like him in Pakistan were put into prison.
pero personas como él fueron sentenciadas a prisión en India.
So the 26 years of his life in Pakistan,
Así que los 26 años en que él fue sentenciado a prisión,
he spent 20 years in prison.
él solo pasó 20 años en prisión.
He was never sentenced by a court of law.
Nunca fue sentenciado por un tribunal de justicia.
This means that he was always sent on the choice or the whims of whoever was in power.
Eso quiere decir que él fue sentenciado y estuvo bajo las decisiones de cualquiera que tuviera poder en esos tiempos.
This is the basic format of the book. I feel if you take a few minutes to read it, you can read through it.
Si ustedes quieren, este es el formato del libro, pueden tomar notas o pueden verlo en la misma presentación que está en español.
It is very important for researchers
Es muy importante para los investigadores
because it is a primary resource,
porque es una fuente primaria.
which means that it is not research or somebody's thoughts, it is someone who was taking part in those events, writing them down.
Básicamente no es un libro que relata cuentos o anécdotas de alguien más, sino que es alguien que tomó parte de esa independencia o que tuvo lugar en esos tiempos bastante importantes.
Point number 6 is his testimony in the West Pakistan High Court. And if you want a general idea or a summary of his political beliefs, you can read this.
El punto 6 es demasiado importante porque él fue testimonio ante él dio testimonio ante el Tribunal Superior de Pakistán en el occidente y si ustedes quieren buscar información sobre esto pueden hacerlo.
Point number 7 is his visit to Afghanistan.
El punto número 7 es la visita a Afganistán.
And this is a very different Afghanistan to what you see in the news now.
Esta es una Afganistán muy diferente a la que ustedes pueden ver en las noticias ahora.
This was an Afghanistan where hippies from Europe could travel freely and it was very safe and peaceful.
Afganistán en esos tiempos era un lugar en el que usted podía viajar libremente y no le iba a pasar nada.
Okay, now I will sort of try to explain why this book is relevant for these days.
Esto que ven acá es por qué el libro es tan relevante para estos tiempos.
Like I mentioned before,
Como dije antes,
it is a primary source document
es un documento de fuente primaria
detailing Pashtun history, politics, and society.
que detalla la historia, la política y la sociedad. En este caso, se refiere a la Pastún, para aclarar.
It is also of interest to sociologists and anthropologists.
Es importante o relevante para la sociología y la antropología.
I would like to note here
Me gustaría destacar acá
that Pashtun and Afghan are the same word. They mean the same thing, the same people. Pashtun and Afghan.
afgán,
Yeah.
que los afganos, en este caso quiere destacar que la palabra pashtún y afganos son lo mismo.
So if someone wants to see the real culture and face of Afghans
Si quieren ver la realidad sobre los afganos
and not what the violence that you see on television,
y observar la violencia que ven en televisión,
this is a good book for that. This is a good book for that.
este es un buen libro para ello.
Point number 3, the politics that he mentions
Las políticas que él menciona
has relevance for the world over.
son relevantes Sorry, can you repeat that part
Yeah,
again?
sure. Has relevance for the whole world.
El punto 3 son los temas políticos que son relevantes para todo el mundo.
For example,
Por ejemplo,
point number 1,
el subpunto 1,
the authoritarian tendencies of states.
las tendencias autoritarias de los estados.
I think people in Latin America are well familiar with that.
Creo que las personas en Latinoamérica están muy familiarizadas con este término.
Then there is the issue of democracy.
Luego está el problema de la democracia.
At that time, like everyone did not have the right to vote.
En ese entonces no todos tenían el derecho para votar.
Now like everyone can vote,
Ahora todo el mundo puede votar.
but as you must know,
Pero como deben saber,
like elections can still be manipulated.
las elecciones igual pueden manipularse.
For example, through social media or through the government.
Por ejemplo, a través de redes sociales o el gobierno.
Point number 3
Su punto número 3
is of like Afghanistan.
es acerca de Afganistán.
Two superpowers of the world,
Las dos superpotencias del mundo,
the Soviet Union and the US,
la Unión Soviética y los Estados Unidos,
have fought wars there.
sorry, come again?
Have fought wars, have been in conflict in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Estuvieron en conflicto en esta región.
This means
Esto significa
that region, the country and the people of Afghanistan
que esta región y la gente de Afganistán
have an impact on the whole world.
tuvieron un impacto en el mundo.
This book, he mentions how these like issues can be solved.
Acá en el libro él menciona cómo estos problemas se pueden solucionar.
Point number 4 is the tolerance of opposition parties.
En el subpunto 4 está la tolerancia a la oposición, a los partidos de oposición.
We have all seen
Hemos visto
that when any political party
que cualquier partido político
comes into power,
viene al poder
they try to destroy the opposition.
y tratan de destruir a sus opuestos.
He also talks about ideology versus individual.
Él también menciona sobre la política, sobre la individualidad y la política.
And how in the Muslim world this is a problem.
Y cómo en el mundo musulmán esto es un problema.
And the Muslim world is where the world's oil production is.
Y el mundo musulmán es donde está todo el petróleo, básicamente.
So the politics of that region affect the economy of the world.
Entonces, las políticas de este lugar pueden afectar la economía mundial.
Then he mentions the importance of education in your mother tongue.
Luego, resalta la importancia de la enseñanza en la lengua nativa o la lengua materna.
And finally, he notes
Y al final, él destaca
that he wanted to write
que quiere escribir
as a guide for future political workers
como una guía para futuros políticos
striving against authoritarianism.
en contra de los autoritarios.
He had a very progressive social outlook.
Él tuvo una visión muy progresista.
You must think that this was almost 60 to 70 years ago.
Podrán saber que esto fue cerca de 60, 70 años atrás,
In a very conservative region of the world.
en una región muy conservativa del mundo.
So point number 1,
Entonces, el punto número 1,
he was an advocate for rationalism.
fue un defensor del racionalismo.
This might sound strange now,
Puede sonar un poco extraño ahora,
but
pero
everyone believed in supernatural spirits,
muchos creen en los espíritus y seres sobrenaturales
and they felt that their life was controlled
y que su vida fue controlada
by supernatural forces.
por fuerzas sobrenaturales.
So for example, they thought
Por ejemplo,
that the British had been sent by God and they could not remove them.
que que los británicos fueron enviados por Dios para...
So a belief in rationalism,
Sorry, come again.
a belief in rationalism
Entonces creen en el racionalismo,
was revolutionary for that time.
era revolucionario para ese entonces.
You might also be surprised by point number 2,
Se sorprenderán también para el punto número 2,
but this is a region of the world
que esta es una región en el mundo
where even today
donde inclusive hoy
people are hesitant
las personas están dudantes
to write the names of their wives.
de escribir los nombres de sus esposas.
He was also against conservative social practices.
Sorry, come again.
He was also against conservative social practices.
Estuvo también en contra de actividades conservativas,
For example, Walwar,
por ejemplo, la Guerra Mundial,
which is basically bride price.
que es básicamente el Gran Premio.
He was the first person in his region.
Él fue la primera persona en la región
To cut his hair
en cortar su cabello
and take off his turban.
y sacar o quitarse su turbante.
And this caused a sensation.
Y esto fue una sensación.
He also took his daughter with him
También tomó al doctor, a su hija, perdón, consigo
on his trip to Afghanistan.
en su viaje a Afganistán.
Point number 6
El punto número 6
should be of a special note.
es muy importante.
If you read about the Muslim world,
Si leen acerca del mundo musulmán,
you always hear of the demand
siempre escuchan sobre la demanda
of Muslim law.
de la ley musulmana.
But he was of the view, or his opinion was,
Su opinión en este caso fue
that the conditions for implementing this Muslim law
que los motivos para implementar esta ley musulmán
are very difficult.
son algo complicadas.
For example,
Por ejemplo,
the state in a Muslim state was responsible for the welfare of every single individual.
que los estados musulmanes fueran responsables de la salud y el bienestar de los individuos.
And you could not have Muslim law till this condition was met.
Y no podemos decir que se cumplió en ese momento.
Also, the rights of women,
También los derechos de la mujer
he said
menciona
that in Muslim law,
que en la ley musulmana
a woman can ask for a divorce
que la mujer puede solicitar el divorcio
if her husband
si su esposo
makes her do the housework without helping her.
la hace hacer el trabajo de los hogares without what?
Without helping her.
Sin ayudarle.
This might be a controversial opinion even today.
Esto inclusive puede ser una opinión controvertida estos días.
So I will now focus on his belief in agency. So as I mentioned previously, people at that time believed that all of their life was in the control of God or some other supernatural being or spirits.
Ahora nos vamos a enfocar en la creencia de la agencia, como la gente antes pensaba que sus vidas estaban dictadas por lo sobrenatural.
So it was hard to convince people that they have their destiny in their own hands.
Entonces era muy complicado convencer a las personas que el destino estaba en sus propias manos.
And obviously people who do not want to change
Y obviamente las personas están reacias a cambiar.
did not like this notion.
No le gustó esta perspectiva o esta noción.
We now touch, so let's go back to the beginning.
Vamos a volver al inicio.
All of these people in the picture
Todas estas personas en la foto
have research done on them, have have been researched.
Han investigado,
People have written books on them.
personas han escrito libros sobre ellos,
They have done their PhDs on them. They have done their PhDs, the doctorate, on the subject of these people.
han hecho sus estudios doctorales sobre ellos,
Except for Samad Khan. Except for Samad Khan.
excepto por Samar Khan.
So there is very little research and very little that has been written about him. Very little research has been done on him.
El señor que él señaló ha sido poco investigado.
One reason for that is
Una razón por la que esto pasó,
that once Pakistan gained independence,
que Pakistán ganó su independencia,
he was branded as a traitor. He was called a traitor. Traitor.
fue considerado un traidor
And he was put into prison.
y él fue encarcelado.
So in the first quote, he sort of expresses his feelings.
En esta primera nota o cita, él menciona básicamente sus pensamientos.
And in the second quote is the only part of the book
Y la segunda cita es la única parte del libro
where he expresses frustration.
en la que él expresa frustración.
Has everybody read it? Has everybody read the...
Como pueden observar o leer,
Yeah? See? And here in the book he tries to explain his own point of view.
en el libro él intenta explicar su punto de vista.
And his logic was very simple,
Su lógica era simple,
that if he did not compromise with the British
que si ellos no se comprometían con los británicos
and did not sell his conscience to them, to sell his conscience,
que si no los hacían conscientes o los
to the British, who were then one of the most powerful nations in the world, to the British, who were at that time one of the most powerful nations in the world,
en ese tiempo que Gran Bretaña era uno de los mayores poderes del mundo,
then he had no reason to do it in Pakistan.
entonces ellos no tienen por qué hacerlo en Pakistán.
Then he sort of details his treatment in prison.
Vamos a ver los detalles de su vida en prisión.
But he clarifies
Él clarifica
that he is only detailing this treatment
que él solo detalla este tratamiento
as a sort of guide
como una forma de guiarse o de guía
for future political workers
para futuros políticos,
and to tell them
para decirles
that the political workers who came before them
que los políticos que vinieron antes que él
had to endure much harder conditions.
tuvieron que pasar por condiciones mucho más fuertes.
So they should also persist in their cause.
Can you repeat that, please?
They should also persist, they should maintain firm in their cause.
Entonces deben mantenerse firmes en sus causas.
This he writes that people who have struggled for a cause
Aquí él escribe que las personas que han pasado por muchas dificultades por una causa
people should value their struggle,
deben valorar sus problemas o su dificultad,
even if they do not agree with their views in the future.
incluso si no están de acuerdo con esta perspectiva en el futuro.
In his own context,
En su propio contexto,
I think he was trying to say
creo que quería decir
that those people who had struggled against the British,
que las personas que la pasaron mal a causa de los británicos,
that their struggle should have been recognized.
que su dificultad tiene que ser reconocida.
So it was wrong to brand them traitors or like enemies after the British left.
Por lo que estuvo mal llamarlos traidores por los británicos.
He gives one specific example.
Da un ejemplo específico.
Zafar Ali Khan
De Zafar Ali Khan.
was a major leader of the Muslim League,
Era un líder principal de la Liga Musulmana,
the party that was responsible for Pakistan.
el partido responsable de Pakistán.
And he shows that despite the opposition of his party,
Muestra que a pesar de la oposición de su partido,
Zafar Ali Khan did not listen to them.
Zafar Ali Khan no los escuchó.
Has everybody read?
¿Lo pueden leer bien?
Okay, I will. So now we cover the main themes of the book,
Ahora vamos a ver los temas principales del libro.
the first of which is democracy.
El primero es la democracia.
I'm not sure, if you know,
No estoy seguro de si ustedes saben
that Bangladesh used to be part of Pakistan,
que Bangladesh solía ser parte de Pakistán
and the population of Bengalis
y la población de bengalíes
was more than the rest of Pakistan.
era más que el resto de Pakistán.
And it is perhaps the only case in history
Y es probablemente el único caso en la historia
where the majority population of a country
donde la mayoría de la población de un país
has broken away from that country.
se ha separado de su país.
So for Afghanistan as well, also for Afghanistan,
Lo mismo con Afganistán,
because the Pashtun population is on both sides of the Pakistan-Afghanistan border,
porque la población de Pastún está en ambos lados de la frontera entre Pakistán y Afganistán.
he said this in 1947,
Esto lo dijo en 1947,
almost 70 years ago,
hace casi 70 años,
that if there is democracy in Pakistan,
que si hay democracia en Pakistán,
the region will be at peace.
la región va a estar en paz.
Unfortunately, Pakistan has had military dictatorships for most of its history,
Lamentablemente, Pakistán ha tenido dictadores militares por la mayor parte de su historia,
and it is one reason why you keep on hearing about violence in that region.
y es la razón por la que se sigue escuchando sobre violencia en esa región.
This is a map of the Pashtun population.
Este es un mapa de la población de Pastún, de la
So-
población Pastún, perdón.
This side is in Pakistan,
Este lado está en Pakistán
and this side is in Afghanistan.
y este otro lado está en Afganistán.
There are more Pashtuns in Pakistan.
Hay más pastunes en Pakistán,
However,
aún así,
they form a smaller percentage of the population.
conforman un porcentaje menor de la población.
In Afghanistan, they are the majority.
En Afganistán está la mayoría.
This fact has an important bearing on the relations of the two countries.
Este hecho tiene una gran relevancia en la relación entre ambos países.
So, what were his demands? What were his demands? It's a question. So what were his demands? It's okay. So these were his demands. These were his demands.
Estas son las demandas que se proponen.
He wanted the vote for every single person.
Quería que todas las personas tuvieran el voto.
It might seem strange to young people,
Parecería extraño para las personas jóvenes,
but in those days,
pero en estos tiempos
you could only vote
solo podrías votar
if you had a certain level of education
si tenías un cierto nivel de educación
or you owned a certain amount of property.
o eras dueño de cierta parte o de cierta propiedad.
He also wanted respect for human rights.
Quería respeto por los derechos humanos.
He himself was charged under the Frontier Crimes Regulation.
A él se le acusó bajo el reglamento de delitos fronterizos.
I urge you to research this law.
Los incito a que averigüen sobre esta ley.
This was a British colonial law
Esta era una ley colonial británica
that was only made for the Pashtuns.
que solo se hizo para los pastunes.
In this law,
En esta ley,
the family of a person could be the family of a person could be held responsible for the crime of, for this law, like in this law, the family of a person could be punished for that person's crime.
En esta ley, la familia de la persona podría ser castigada por los crímenes de esa persona.
For example,
Por ejemplo,
it was very common
era muy común
that the parents,
que los padres,
the wife,
la esposa,
the brothers,
los hermanos,
the sisters,
las hermanas
and the children
y los niños
of a person
de una persona
could be sent to prison
podrían ser enviados a prisión
for a crime
por los crímenes
that he had committed,
que esta persona cometió,
which was usually
que usualmente era
some sort of opposition to colonial rule.
algún tipo de oposición al colonialismo.
So it was a very draconian means harsh. It was a very harsh law.
Entonces era una ley muy draconiana o fuerte.
And like it is called a black law.
Le llamaron la ley negra.
They could even demolish your house for a very minor like offense.
Podían incluso demoler su casa por una ofensa menor.
So he wanted this law to be abolished.
Entonces él quería que esta ley fuera abolida.
And finally, he wanted a multi-party political system in Pakistan.
Quería un sistema político de muchos partidos.
Now he talks about Balochistan.
Ahora habla sobre Baluchistán.
In the culture of the Pashtuns,
En la cultura de los pastunes
there is a traditional council
hay un consejo tradicional
called the Jirga.
llamado Jiga o Jiga.
The British colonial authorities
Las autoridades británicas coloniales
had changed this institution of Jirga
cambiaron esta institución
and made it a tool for their own rule.
y la convirtieron en una herramienta para su propio mandato.
He wanted a return to the cultural traditions of Pashtuns,
Él quería que se regresara a la tradición cultural de los pastunes.
as this is how their traditional justice was given.
Y esta es como la justicia se iba a dar.
Now we come to the topic of Pashtunistan, Pashtunkhwa, Afghania.
Ahora vamos al tema sobre Pastunistán, Pastunkhwa o Afgania.
This is a very controversial topic.
Es un tema muy controversial.
These terms were banned in Pakistan till almost 15 to 20 years ago.
Estas palabras se prohibieron en Pakistán hace casi 20 años.
The propaganda in Pakistan was that
La propaganda en Pakistán decía
Pashtunistan meant
que Pastunistán significaba
the breakup of Pakistan.
el rompimiento de Pakistán.
Obviously this was not true,
Claramente esto no era cierto,
but this was one of the political sticks, the palito. So this was one of the political like strategies
esta era una de las estrategias políticas
used to sideline people that the state did not like.
utilizadas para sacar del paso a las personas que no les gustaban.
In the book, he clarifies what he meant by Pashtunistan,
En el libro él clarifica lo que quiere decir por Pastunistán,
which is a united province of all contiguous Pashtun areas of Pakistan.
Lo que significa es una provincia unida de todas las áreas pastunes contiguas a Pakistán.
So basically all of this color in purple.
Básicamente todo lo que está en morado.
Right now in Pakistan,
En este momento en Pakistán,
the Pashtun population is divided in 3 provinces.
la población pastún está dividida en 3 provincias.
He writes that it is natural for people who speak the same language to want to live together.
Él escribe que es natural que las personas que hablan el mismo idioma quieran vivir juntas.
So the only solution to the conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan
Entonces, la única solución para el conflicto entre Afganistán y Pakistán
was to form a Pashtun province in Pakistan
sería formar una provincia pastún en Pakistán,
where Pashtuns had rights over their language, culture and traditions.
donde los pastunes tendrían derechos sobre su idioma y cultura y tradiciones.
Unfortunately, this was not done.
Desafortunadamente esto no se logró.
And if you Google the news even right now,
Y si ustedes googlean, buscan en Google las noticias en este momento,
you will see that in the last week,
verán que en la última semana
there have been multiple suicide bombings,
han habido múltiples bombardeos suicidas,
shootings,
tiroteos
and airstrikes,
y ataques aéreos,
and drone strikes. Drones
y ataques por drones
in this region,
en esta región.
which basically means that even after 70 plus years, this region is still not at peace.
Lo que quiere decir que incluso después de 70 años esta región aún no está en paz.
So the green is one province.
La parte en verde es una provincia.
These two regions to the right of the river are in another province.
Estas dos regiones al lado derecho del río son otros países, otra provincia, perdón.
And this brown is another province.
Y la parte café es otra provincia.
So you can see from the map that it would be very simple to create one province,
Entonces pueden ver en el mapa que sería muy simple crear una sola provincia,
which looks like this.
que se vería así.
By the way, I am from here,
De paso, yo soy de acá,
number 6.
del número 6.
We now come to the problem of British Balochistan.
Ahora llegamos al problema de Balochistan británica.
If you read this paragraph, this will give you a good idea of what the problem is.
Si leen este párrafo se darán una buena idea de cuál es el problema.
So I'll give you a few seconds to read the paragraph.
Les daré un par de segundos para que lo lean.
If you look at the map of Pakistan today,
Si ven el mapa de Pakistán hoy en día,
Balochistan is this grey province.
Balochistan es la parte en gris, esa gran provincia.
It is the largest province in Pakistan.
Es la provincia más grande en Pakistán,
It is the most mineral rich,
es la más rica en minerales
and it has the Gwadar port, which is being developed by the Chinese. It has a puerto,
Tiene un puerto que es muy valioso para los chinos,
which is being developed by the Chinese. So if you look at the map from the year 1860,
Si ven el mapa del 1860,
this part of what is now Balochistan
esta parte que ahora es Balochistan
is part of Afghanistan,
es parte de Afganistán.
and the people living here are
Y la gente que vive acá
like Afghans or Pashtuns,
son afganes o pastunes,
which is the same thing. It is two words for one people.
que es lo mismo, son dos palabras para una misma gente.
Now we go into a little history of colonialism.
Ahora vamos a ver un poco sobre la historia del colonialismo.
Whenever a colonial power would take over part of a country,
Cuando un poder colonial toma poder de una parte de un país,
they would name the region after themselves.
Nombrarán a la región con su propio nombre.
So for example,
Por ejemplo,
you have British Guyana,
tenemos a la Guayana británica,
Dutch Guyana,
la Guyana holandesa,
Spanish Guyana,
la Guyana o Guayana española
and French Guyana.
y la Guayana francesa.
If we now go to the continent of Africa,
Y si nos movemos hacia África,
we can see British Somaliland,
podemos ver la Somalia británica,
like Italian Somaliland,
la Somalia italiana,
British East Africa,
la África oriental británica
and the Belgian Congo.
y el Congo belga.
Sorry. So this is one of the Pashtun regions in Pakistan.
Esta es una de las regiones pastunes en Pakistán.
The dark green was areas under the control of the British,
Lo que está en verde oscuro fue lo que estaba controlado por los británicos,
while the light green and the orange were like autonomous free zones.
la parte naranja es los que estaban en libertad.
This area became a chief commissioner's province, which is like a smaller province, in 1901.
Esta región era una pequeña provincia en 1901
And it became a full province in 1932.
y no fue hasta en 1932 que se convirtió en una provincia mucho más grande.
Sindh is one more province of Pakistan.
Sindh también es una provincia de Pakistán
It was taken out of Bombay in 1936.
y fue separada de Bombay en 1936.
This red part is British Balochistan.
La parte que está en rojo es la Baluchistán británica.
It became a chief commissioner's province in 1877.
Se convirtió en una provincia de comisionado en 1877.
However, the name of British Balochistan was inappropriate.
Sin embargo, el nombre de Baluchistán británica era inapropiado.
Like I showed you in the previous slides,
Como vieron en las diapositivas anteriores,
this region was taken by the British from like Afghanistan.
esta región fue tomada esta parte fue tomada de lo que fue la Afganistán británica.
So as was the convention in the colonial world,
Eso fueron básicamente las convenciones del mundo colonial.
it should have been named British Afghanistan.
Sorry, come again.
It should have been named British Afghanistan.
Y por ese motivo se tuvo que haber llamado la Afganistán británica
Or British Pashtunistan.
o la sorry, again.
Or British Pashtunistan. Pashtunistan
O
británico.
okay, thank you. O la Pashtunistán británica.
But this was not done.
Pero esto no fue de esa manera.
Jinnah is the founder of Pakistan.
Jinnah es el nombre del fundador de Pakistán.
Before the creation of Pakistan,
Antes de la creación de Pakistán,
in 1929,
en el año de 1929,
he put 14 demands to the British.
habían 14 puntos que él pedía a los británicos.
Demand number 11 says that reforms should be introduced in the NWFP and Balochistan.
En el punto 11 mencionan que estas reformas tenían que aplicarse en las leyes.
So while the NWFP became a full province in 1932,
Y no fue hasta 1932 que la NWFP se convirtió en una provincia en Pakistán.
and Sindh became a full province in 1936,
Y Sindh se volvió una provincia en 1936.
British Balochistan,
La Baluchistán británica,
which had been formed in 1877,
que se formó en 1877,
never became a province.
nunca se convirtió en una provincia.
From 1955 to 1970. From 1955 to 1970.
Yeah, keep going.
All of this Pakistan became one province.
Desde 1955 desde 1955 y hasta 1970, toda esta región se convirtió en Pakistán.
This was to balance the majority population of Bengalis in East Pakistan, which then became Bangladesh.
Toda esta región fue poblada por bengalíes que luego se convertiría en Bangladesh.
But even during this time, the red and yellow parts were different administrative units.
Pero aún así, en estos tiempos, la zona roja y la zona amarilla eran diferentes.
So why did he oppose the current province of Balochistan?
Entonces, ¿por qué él se oponía a la provincia de Baluchistán?
The first reason was that it brought two different ethnic groups into one province. It brought two different national groups into one province.
Ok, que hicieron, tomaron dos zonas y la hicieron una sola provincia.
These two nationalities had very different cultures and customs.
Y que estas dos zonas tienen diferentes culturas e idiomas.
For example,
Por ejemplo,
the yellow part was all Baloch people who are a different ethnic group.
ok, toda la parte en amarillo eran los Babalush.
Baloch. So they did not have the regular British colonial law.
Ellos no tenían una no cumplían con la ley británica.
They were ruled by chiefs who had absolute control and could make their own laws.
Eran liderados por líderes que tomaban todas las decisiones.
So he writes, how can these two areas be combined into a single province?
Es por esto que estas dos zonas no deberían haber sido o haberse convertido en una sola provincia.
And then he lists a number of reasons why this would not be a good idea.
Y en estos puntos él menciona por qué eso no, o esa decisión no fue una buena decisión.
But he does not just give the criticisms of this idea,
Pero él no solo critica esta idea,
he also provides recommendations.
él da soluciones a ese problema.
The first recommendation that he gave is that it would be not possible to teach both groups in their mother tongue.
Él menciona que las dos zonas no pueden,
So both groups could not, so if you had one single language in the province,
ok, si en estas dos zonas se da un solo idioma o se enseña un solo idioma,
and he was of the point of view that if the beginning schooling of a child is in the mother tongue, that makes it much easier for them to learn later on.
él menciona que si desde niños se les enseña una lengua materna, es mucho más fácil cambiar a otras lenguas o usar otras lenguas.
This is also what the research of UNESCO says.
Esta es una de las investigaciones de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas para la Educación, la Ciencia y la Cultura, UNESCO.
So if you don't teach children in their mother tongue, it makes it harder for them to gain further education.
En la cual se menciona que si usted no le enseña a los niños en su lengua materna, se les va a hacer muy complicado comunicarse y entender.
He therefore wanted a Pashtun province where the children were educated in Pashto, which is their mother tongue.
Él propuso que los pastunes se educaran en la lengua pastún.
And this is still not the case in Pakistan.
Este no fue el caso en Pakistán.
For example, I never studied Pashto in school.
Por ejemplo, Ayaz nunca estudió pastún.
I had to learn it by myself at home.
Él tuvo que aprenderlo por sí solo en casa.
He was also a linguist,
Él también era un lingüista
and he wanted to change the script in which Pashto was written.
y el abuelo de Ayaz quería cambiar la manera en la que el pastún era escrita.
So he wanted a phonetic script for Pashto.
Entonces él creó una escritura diferente para el pastún.
So I realized that most of you cannot read the Arabic script. Arabic script.
Me imagino que muchos o todos de nosotros no podemos entender ninguna de estas palabras o frases,
But you must trust me
pero debemos creerle
that this is how you write his name.
que básicamente es como se escribe su nombre.
Yeah. So this is Abdul Samad. This is Abdul Samad, his name.
Este es su nombre, es Abdul
Samad.
Samad.
Yeah. The difference is
Las diferencias son
that this first one
que esta primera
has these sounds from the Arabic language. These sounds are from Arabic.
Okay, que lo que él señala viene del idioma árabe,
Which a normal Pashtun person cannot pronounce.
que normalmente una persona de pastún no puede pronunciar.
So there was no point in having them in the script.
Entonces no tendría sentido que ellos lo hablaran o que se hablara en las calles.
So therefore he said that his name should be written as the way that it is spoken in Pashto.
Okay, y dice que esos nombres deberían ser pronunciados a como son escritos en pastún.
Here is one more example.
Pueden ver un ejemplo más.
These are two words in Pashto,
Estas son dos palabras en pastún,
but each word can have two different meanings.
pero
Each word can have two different meanings.
cada una de ellas tiene su significado.
Therefore, he proposed that the different meanings can be written in a different way.
Después él menciona que estas dos palabras deben ser escritas de diferente manera.
So, for example, this small dash here
Por ejemplo, ese guión abajo
and this big dash here.
y ese gran triángulo arriba.
If you don't have these, if you don't have this dash and this,
Si ustedes no tienen esos dos símbolos,
you cannot tell if this word means your sister or if it means a implement. If it means your daughter or if it means a implement.
okay, si ustedes no tienen esos símbolos, ustedes no pueden diferenciar si usted está diciendo hija o implementar.
In the same way, if you don't have this dash and this little circle,
Al igual que si usted no tiene esos dos símbolos, el guión y el circulito en esa palabra,
you cannot tell whether this word means sword or if it means black.
que usted no va a poder diferenciar si se refiere a la palabra espadas o negra.
So he wanted reform. He wanted reform in the politics, in the society, and even in the language of Pashtuns.
Así que él quería reformar la cultura, el idioma y la manera en la que se escribía en esos tiempos.
But he was not a xenophobe or someone who disliked other languages. He was not someone who disliked other languages, so he was not a chauvinist.
Okay. Él no era una persona que le desagradaba que se hablara en otras lenguas.
So while he shows his love for his mother tongue Pashto,
Lo único que él demostraba era que él estaba enamorado del idioma.
he also regrets not learning the English language. He also regrets not learning English.
Okay. Él básicamente se lamentaba de no haber podido hablar inglés.
So again, you must imagine those times. You must imagine the time when he lived.
Okay. Ustedes se pueden imaginar que en esos tiempos,
If you went to school and gained a education,
si ustedes van a la escuela y se educan,
the only job that was open to you was to work for the colonial government.
La única puerta que se les abría para trabajar era trabajar en las colonias.
And he did not want to do that.
Y él no apoyaba esto.
But he regrets that nobody told him. He regrets that nobody told him.
Okay. Él se lamentaba de que nadie le hubiera dicho
That learning the English language would open knowledge for him.
que el idioma inglés sería muy importante para él.
I'll just briefly go over this, but his idea was that
Voy a ir rápidamente sobre esto, pero su idea era que
to like oppose something as strong as a colonial government
para oponerse a algo tan fuerte como el gobierno colonial,
has to be an effort from all of society
tiene que ser un esfuerzo de la sociedad en su completa,
in big ways and small.
de forma pequeña y grande.
So the example he gives is
El ejemplo que nos da es
that the Indian National Congress leaders
que los líderes del Congreso indio,
who were fighting against the British for their independence
que estaban luchando contra los británicos por su independencia,
would stay with high civil like officials who were serving the British.
se quedarían con oficiales de alto rango que
Government
estaban
officials.
sirviendo a los británicos.
So it was just to show that big or small, like everybody has to play their part in social change.
Esto muestra que grande o pequeño todo el mundo tiene que poner su parte en el cambio social.
And it is only with such complete and concerted national efforts that foreign forces could be defeated in a peaceful, non-violent way. This
Solo
way.
con esfuerzo nacional tan completo y concertado se podrán derrotar las fuerzas extranjeras de forma pacífica y no violenta.
And in the end, he sort of, one of his like inspirations
Al final, una de sus inspiraciones fue
was a missionary lady doctor
una directora misionera
that he had met as a child.
que él conoció de niño.
He was very surprised to see
Se sorprendió de ver
that how this person had left their home and their friends
cómo esta persona dejó atrás su casa y sus amigos
and come so far away to serve foreign people.
y vino tan lejos para servir a personas extranjeras.
And he wondered why people or why his own people did not do this for themselves.
Y él se preguntó por qué su propia gente no hacía esto.
So this was a sort of like inspiration that he made up his mind that once he grows up, he would do such work.
Entonces esto lo inspiró a que una vez que él creciera, él iba a hacer este tipo de trabajo.
So I thank you very much, and my only request is that this book has been translated into Russian, into Ukrainian, into Urdu. A French translation is happening. So if there is anyone who would like to translate it into Spanish for their master's or PhD or just like that, we would appreciate that.
Les agradezco mucho y lo único que les pido es que si alguien está interesado en traducirlo en el español, que para su trabajo de doctorado, entonces que se comuniquen con él.
So again, thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions, I am all yours.
Muchas gracias por venir. Si tienen alguna pregunta, la pueden hacer en este momento.
Bien, muchas gracias. No sé si alguien tiene alguna consulta, alguna pregunta, algún comentario. Compañero.
He was against the partition of Pakistan from India. Then he wanted autonomous, let's say, province of Afghania. But at the end of his life, what was his idea? An independent country of all the Pashtuns, or only the autonomous province, or what?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll just go into some of the background. Also, a lot of Muslim leaders in India, they opposed the partition because they belonged to provinces where Muslims were the majority. So they never sort of feared the Hindu majority. Most of the support for Pakistan came from areas where Hindus were the majority and Muslims were a minority. So those who opposed the division of India, they said that if you have these large Muslim provinces in India, that will sort of be a counterbalance to the other provinces where Hindus are a majority. And if you break away, then the Muslims that are left will have no one to protect them. So that was sort of the reasoning. And he also writes in the book that they still might have made a Pakistan, but they wanted to negotiate for Pakistan once the British had left. So I did not mention, but I think in the partition of India, almost 1 million people were murdered. So almost 1 million people killed each other. So there was a lot of bloodshed here and here in Bengal and the Punjab. So at the end of his life, he wanted a single Pashtun province, and his colleague, I think I can show you the picture. Well, it's too far back, but the colleagues that I showed at the beginning, they sort of broke away with him. And he had a conversation with them that, why are you not creating a single province? So they said that we will protect you in the other province. And the reply he gave was very interesting. He said that Gandhi had promised us the same thing when India was divided. Gandhi is dead now, and we have been in prison for almost 10 to 15 years. So what is the guarantee that if we don't make this province, you will be able to protect me? So to answer your question, at the end of his life, he was of the view that you should have a single province. And like I mentioned in my slides, like obviously the border, it cuts through the Pashtun nation. There's no, so for example, I have my tribe, half is living over there, half is living over here. We have ties. There are people whose homes are in Pakistan and their lands or their shops are in like Afghanistan, and vice versa. And there are people like in Afghanistan whose lands are in Pakistan. So the idea was that if you have a democratic Pakistan in which all of these like ethnic groups are given their rights, then you can have sort of a balance between the two states. And if you don't have that, then you will have the problems like we are seeing in the news like even now. So his idea was that you should have a single Pashtun province in Pakistan and that you must have a democratic Pakistan.
Perfecto. ¿Alguien más quisiera hacer alguna pregunta? I just have a question.
Sure.
In this case, he thought all the time that the multinational state was possible. We can say that.
Yep.
How he tried to understand politically that expression. That's I would say the doubt that I have when I hear to you, or listen to you, when he proposed this kind of national project, but with many ethnic groups who are very different among them.
You mean when like India was one? Or in Pakistan?
In Pakistan, in that case.
No, I'm not sure. So in Pakistan now there are 5 different like ethnic groups, the major ones, and each one has a province except for the Pashtuns. So the idea was that if you give them a province as well, then it sort of will create a balance. And I think again his answers were always like, if you have democracy in a country, you will be able to sort of negotiate these issues like through them. But if you don't, and if you have, say, like a military government or like authoritarian states, then you will start to see these problems to come up. I mean, he himself, I don't know if you mentioned it, but he formed the first opposition party in Pakistan, the first, 1948, and it was with different like ethnic groups. So I think working across them was not a problem.
No sé si alguien más tiene alguna consulta. Go ahead.
Sorry. rather surprised. How is going to work if it is an hypothetical situation that Pashtun became one single in Afghanistan or Pakistan? Is it better just to have it in just one country like Afghanistan or Pakistan, or he wants to create, or he wants that Pashtun became a single country?
So, I mean, countries are not made every day, right? So when you're creating or breaking a country, there's a lot of violence, and changing borders can set, it can have a chain reaction, and you don't know how that could be. So I think he was okay with sort of the way the border was now. So all he was saying is, you need to have all of the Pashtuns in Pakistan in one province in which they can have their education and their working life in Pashto. So for example, you have it in Spanish here. Right now the problem is if someone from the village who does not know English goes to a court of law or to a notary or something else, there he has to communicate in a language that he does not know. So basically he's completely stuck. So what he was asking for was that you need one province here where you can have the language there to make it easier for people in the rural areas, people in other areas, because even if you haven't been to school, you can still speak the language. And with Afghanistan, all he was saying was that if you have democracy in Pakistan, which means, so for example, the Pashtuns on either side of the border would never want war or would never want violence on the other side. So basically, if you have democracy in Pakistan, that's a way to ensure that you would have friendly relations on both sides of the line. And this was what used to be the case. So before this war, in Afghanistan, there were students in Pakistan who used to go and study in Afghanistan. The Kabul University was one of the best in Asia, and there were people who could trade because they spoke the language. So it was a advantage to be of the same ethnic group on both sides. But the minute then that violence comes in and you have war, then that creates problems. So he was very clear in his thinking. There are some parts of the book where he mentions that a revolution, a violent revolution, is not the answer, because that will only create more problems. So he believed in a political course of action, and he believed in a very democratic sort of. So in Pakistan, he was we need to create a single province. And I hope you research. I know this was a very overview of the topic. But if you research, if you go on to Google and you research these terms, you will come up with a lot more information.
Perfecto. No sé si alguien más quisiera hacer alguna pregunta. Primero la compañera y después el compañero.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for such a thorough explanation and, for being here. Then my question was more related to the language. Is it Pashto? That? How many people speak it? Is it very, because when it comes to I would say, I don't know if you would call it a dying language or a language that not a lot of people speak, because it also happened here in our native tribes. There are certain languages that are dying and we want to preserve, so they're teaching them in schools. Would you say how many people speak Pashto?
That's a very good question. I should have made a slide on that. So to answer your question, Pashtuns are also a tribe. We are the largest patrilineal tribal group in the world, which means that we see our tribal groupings through the father, through the male sort of line. So this is the distribution of our the population, and this is about 35 million people. So Pashto is the national and the official language. Pashto and Dari, they have two, like in Afghanistan. But in Pakistan, it is not really taught in schools. And the fear is just like you said, if a language is not the language of business and the language of courts and the language of everyday life, there is no incentive to learn it. And then you're slowly sort of losing the language. And I think with the language, you also lose a part of yourself, because there is much more to culture, there's much more to language. So for example, the Eskimos I've heard have 20 words for a particular type of snow. So we might see snow and call it snow rice, but they can differentiate 20 different. So each language has its own richness that it brings to the globe. So we are a lot of people, we're almost 35 million people. So it does make sense to sort of have that. But we do have problems as well. So when I showed you the script, our script is still like a Persian / Arabic script, which makes it very hard to learn. So what he was saying, that if you simplify the script and you make it like the sounds that the people speak, then you will sort of, imagine if in Spanish you had a letter which you cannot pronounce. You'd be like, why do I have this? So in the same way, we have letters that a Arab person can pronounce, but we can't pronounce them. So why are they still there? So just to simplify that sort of language. But then also me and Dr. Esteban was talking yesterday. It's also how states are formed. So if it's a inclusive state, for example, like the Swiss, they have 5 languages, they're all national languages, they're all promoted, it happens. But if you look at, say, for example, Latin America, in a lot of cases when the states were being formed, they sort of emphasized Spanish and they de-emphasized the local languages. And like you said, you've lost some of those. So for example, the Native Americans in the USA, they've lost their language, they've lost their culture, and some people say that is the reason why they are having a hard time there. So yeah, I will include a slide in my next presentation showing that the population and where it's a national language. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for the presentation and all this QA session. I would like to know something. If I recall correctly, you're co-translator of this book, right? Yep. Since we have several things to cover while translating, how challenging was this part for you? Because there's a lot of things to focus on, and actually seeing one of the interviews you had a couple weeks ago, you mentioned that how to catch the attention, because that's quite important while translating some sort of documents.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And me and your teacher, I forgot your name, Nestor, we were talking before the talk started. Translation is it's very hard because nuances in language are hard to translate. And if you have idioms or phrases, they become so. What might make sense in English might not make sense in Spanish. What might make sense in Spanish might. So, for example, in English, you have to put the horse before the cart. I don't know if you tell that to someone in Spanish, they might be like, "What are you trying to tell me here?" So, in Pashto, again, it was hard, and it was also hard. So, you must realize that he was writing while he's in prison. So he's in prison for 10 years and he's writing, so he does not have access to a library, to reference books, to Google or anything like that. So he's writing from memory. And if you look at the original manuscript, he has written on every single centimeter of the page, because you're in prison, pen and ink and pages are very scarce, so he's trying to make use of everything. So, and he's writing as if you would speak, so you have also very long sentences. So it was very tough, and at times it was also very frustrating. It took me around like 2.5, 3 years to sort of get this done. And there were even words which I did not, for example, at some point I mentioned that like sociologists and like anthropologists might find this interesting. At some point he mentions the name of every piece of jewelry a woman would wear on her wedding. So some things I knew, like a nose ring and earring, but there were some things I had no idea. Like I had to go and ask my mom, or I had to go and ask somebody's like grandmother that, hey, do you know what this was? And she was like, oh, there's one piece which comes from here and goes around your neck, and there are some bangles that you wear here and some that you wear here. So they all had like different names. So even for me, it was a challenge. Yeah. So, but again, I hope you persist in your like studies, because you did a great job with the translation. I know it's very difficult, but I think it's also very rewarding, because if you're able to communicate somebody's idea to like other people, at least I find it like a really good thing. That if, so for example, in my some people back in Pakistan who have not gone to school, they cannot speak English, so I've sort of helped them out like a few times, and I find it really helpful that I'm able to take someone's words and translate that into a different medium. It's almost like you're giving that person a voice. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfecto. Si no hay otra pregunta, les agradecemos mucho la asistencia. Thank you so much to Dr. Ayaz, y para los traductores muchas gracias, porque la verdad fue un gran esfuerzo y una práctica poco común, digamos, en la Universidad de Costa Rica, y creo que debería ser como más utilizada por diferentes razones, que además estamos en un mundo académico donde hay un intercambio de lenguas constante, y esta es una gran oportunidad para nosotros también desde la cátedra de poder ofrecerles al público que nos está viendo y al público que está presente una actividad de este tipo. Así que muchas gracias y los esperamos en las siguientes actividades que tiene la cátedra. Buenas tardes.